I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling. But out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Outside the Therapy Room. Today we are joined by Sarah. Hello.
Hi.
So I've gotten a couple of inquiries about a new topic for us, and that topic has been on validation. I think a lot of couples that I have seen or who have, other therapists who have worked with couples, there seems to be a big conversation around validating each other and how to validate each other's emotions. And sometimes that can be confusing because the word valid means to say that that is the truth, that that is accurate, that that is real. And to validate someone else's emotions can sometimes feel strange because we don't know if it is true in that, I guess, that description of validation. And so I thought, we could talk a little bit today on what the heck is validation? Why is this so important? And maybe we can give folks some tips on how they can practice validation.
Cool. That sounds great.
So, what does validation mean to you? How would you define it?
So, when I think of being validating, for me, it's accepting people and their feelings without judgment. So, I don't have to necessarily believe that not what they're saying is true, but that they can say, I feel this way. And I say, I acknowledge that without challenging it or, kind of coming up against whatever they're saying.
Mm-hmm. And when I did a little Google search to be able to give like a proper quote unquote definition of validation, there was a lot of different definitions. And like I mentioned, right, the original definition of just saying like what is validation, the description of validation is proving the validity or the accuracy of something. And again, that's where things can get confusing because we don't know how someone else is feeling, but we are trusting them and knowing that what they are sharing, that they are feeling is accurate. And so validation in relationships is that we are affirming that a person's feelings, experiences, and opinions make sense. So we're hearing them. We are saying, we believe you. We know that this is how you are feeling. And so we are validating that for them.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how difficult that can be sometimes because especially in like close relationships, it can be difficult to especially if you're in conflict, it can be difficult to
Yeah.
understand or realize that two people in the same situation can have very different realities.
Mm-hmm.
So someone might say, "Oh, this is making me feel X, Y, and Z," and the other person might not validate that because they're like, well, why would you feel that way? I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see how that can like create some conflict or some misunderstanding, miscommunication.
Yeah, I think at the core of it, validation really is understanding. You might not
Mhm.
feel the exact same way as them, but you can understand their perspective on that situation, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm sure you've experienced this, but I know I have gone to movies and I've watched the whole movie with somebody next to me, and my takeaway or my lesson that I kind of absorbed from that movie is different than the
Mhm.
lesson or whatever the other person got from it. And so it's not that I'm dismissing them to say like, well, no, the lesson that came out of it for me, that's like the one that is the truth. It's no, like, based on our experiences, based on our
Mhm.
emotional states, our childhoods, our experiences in relationship to the world, our family, other individuals, we're going to have different reaction or different response to a movie
Mhm.
or to a situation. And so it's not to
Mhm.
say like one feeling is the correct feeling in that situation. Well, no, it's again, I can understand how you saw this movie and that was your takeaway from it. And this was what my takeaway was from the movie. Same thing with situations. Like you mentioned,
Mhm.
same situation, there's going to be different takeaways.
Mhm. Do you think that it's possible to validate without understanding?
I think it is. I think we can
Yeah.
validate that experience for someone and we can say, I understand that this is how you understand it. And
Mhm.
we might not fully grasp a full understanding of how they felt because we may have never been put in that
Mhm.
situation before. But it's similar to empathy, right? Empathy, when we
Mhm.
teach it to kids, it's like you're walking in someone else's shoes. Those shoes might not fit you. They might
Yeah.
not, they might be too small, or they might not have been the exact same, but you're going into it by just having an understanding that the emotional response to a situation is how they are feeling. And so
Yeah.
I get that in the situation you felt really frustrated or really annoyed, even if that's maybe feels like it wouldn't be your reaction in a situation.
Mhm.
That's a
Mhm.
really good question.
Yeah, because I think that it's like when we're talking about everything that we bring into a situation, like our experiences, our past traumas, things that have happened to us, things that haven't happened to us but happened to somebody else,
Yeah.
it can be really difficult to understand where somebody's coming from and accept their position or their viewpoint or their feelings.
Mhm.
So I think that part of like validating or validation is when we can say, hey, I don't know how you got to that. I don't know, you know, I'm not experiencing the same feelings that you're experiencing, but what you're going through is valid and I understand and I want to support you, or I
Mhm.
acknowledge, however you're feeling or thinking.
Yeah. Well, you're affirming
So,
their
yeah.
emotional state in that moment. You're saying that it makes sense that
Yeah.
they are feeling the way that they are feeling.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as we just shared, like validation is really important in any relationship that we have because it
Hmm.
helps us feel seen. It helps us feel heard by those that are important to us, by the people that are in our lives, whether that's a family member, a friend, or a partner. We
Hmm.
want to feel seen and we want to feel heard by them. And that's where validation comes in.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you seen Modern Family?
No, well, I think I saw a few episodes here and there.
Yeah, I don't remember what season it is, but there's an episode where Phil, the husband,
Hmm.
goes to, I guess, like a spa with a bunch of ladies, and he's getting his nails done. And his partner, Claire, is complaining with him over the phone, and he keeps like trying to give advice or validating the emotions that other people are having, and kind
Mm.
of, accidentally then invalidating her. And a lot of the women around are like, well, of course she responded that way. And they teach him about validation, kind of, right? They're like, you need to
Hmm.
listen. If she says, I'm so mad, you feel like, yeah, that sucks. Or you don't always
Hmm.
have to jump to give advice. And I thought just that episode really, but just that clip when he's like, oh, what? That's all I have to do. And then he goes home and he does it. And she's like, oh my God, thank you so much. I needed that. It
Yeah.
gives him a huge hug. Like that really is a great visual of what it is to validate somebody.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it can be really easy to step into like a problem solving mode, right? Like somebody says,
Hmm.
this is what's wrong, or this is how I'm feeling. Okay, like what can I do for you? Are you okay? Have you done this? But
Yeah.
really, sometimes all people want is to be heard. They want to be
Yeah.
heard and seen. And I think that's something that, like, I'm guilty of. Like, I'm all, like, let me help you, right?
Yeah.
Rather than let me just listen to what you're saying and
Hmm.
validate your thoughts and feelings
Hmm.
rather than try to fix the situation.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes it's my own discomfort that shows up when somebody's upset.
Mhm.
And so I want to fix it. Like, for example, with my kids, I get really
Mhm.
distraught when they are upset and I'm trying to like keep it in. And so I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Are you okay? Like, what can I do? How can I make it better? And sometimes I have to really pull back and just hold space for them and validate them and just sit in whatever emotion they're having, which is super
Mhm.
uncomfortable for me sometimes. It's so
Mhm.
easy for me to do that at work. But when it comes to like my kids, it's
Yeah.
very challenging to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we jump into that problem solving because we oftentimes it's because it's our own discomfort that's showing up of like not our discomfort of seeing somebody that we love be suffering in some way.
Mhm.
But if we take a step back and we just listen, then that can actually be what they are needing in that moment to be able to get them
Mhm.
out of whatever state they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm reflecting on the times where I haven't received validation or given validation,
Hmm.
and I think that it's a lot harder if you're, like, in conflict or if you're, um, discussing something that's really sensitive. I think it can be easy to not actually listen to the other
Hmm.
person,
Yeah.
but rather step into this place of judgment or,
Hmm.
um, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think too with that and going back to when I mentioned like just listening, there is
Mhm.
a phrase that people may already have heard, which is active listening. And so would you like to tell people what active listening is?
Oh my gosh. Um, so active listening is, I can't actually remember the I learned this in school. I don't remember. So just listening without judgment, using validation. Um,
It's like being present with them, right? Like
yeah.
not feeling distracted. They are your main focus, whatever they are saying. You are
Mhm.
repeating what they are
Yeah.
saying, like a paraphrasing.
Yes, which is difficult to do sometimes. A
Yeah.
lot of, like, if you're, especially in personal relationships, I feel.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You really have to bite your tongue and not jump in with, I told you so, or advice and just
Hmm.
sit with it.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah. But active listening is a skill that you can build and you can practice, which really is putting your full attention to the person that is speaking. And
Hmm.
I think also with that active listening, there is a lot of validation that happens in there because you are kind of like not mimicking, I guess paraphrasing. You're paraphrasing what it is that they're saying. And so if I come to you, Sarah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had such a long day, an example of active listening would be, oh my gosh, you had a really tough day. Why don't you tell me about it? Or
Hmm.
do you want to talk about it? And so you're
Hmm.
using some of the language that they are using to kind of bring it back to them to further that conversation. And in there, like obviously, we're sprinkling in moments of validation.
It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some ways that we can offer validation to those around us?
A lot of the ways you just mentioned, I think, being present in listening to whoever we're with, staying off your phone, not being distracted by TV or something else. If somebody's asking for your attention or asking to have a purposeful conversation, yeah, being mindful of how they're feeling and how it might be different than how you're feeling or how you understand the situation,
Mhm.
honoring how they're feeling, supporting them in their feelings or their thoughts. Yeah, and I want to say validating them, but that's that's basically what you're doing.
Yeah. I think part of validation too, though, is um, kind of being observant to their behavior
Mhm.
and communicating that. Like, hey, Sarah, you look upset. Is everything okay? Did you want to talk
Mhm.
about it? I'm here if you don't want to talk about it right now. Like, I'm still here. I'm available. So, like, even just creating that safe space is a form of
Mhm.
validation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
Do you remember a time where you either felt validated or invalidated that you're comfortable sharing?
Yes. Yeah. To be honest with you, I can't think of anything right now where I felt validated, but I noticed that in some discussions with my husband when if things are like heightened or a bit spicy,
Hmm.
it can be like I can say something or he'll say something and we're not listening to each other. We are
Yeah.
just in our own thoughts and our own feelings. And it's really hard to validate or acknowledge when you're in that space.
Hmm.
Um, so definitely not feeling validated because I think we're both just really concerned about getting our point across rather than
Right.
listening to the other person's point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
So, but
just,
I think that's common. I hope that's common.
oh my gosh, it's definitely common. And we just had a conversation about this like 2 or 3 weeks ago, in our episode on conflict with Jenny, where we did talk about, like kind of being able to recognize those moments so that you can call a pause, so that you can go back and regulate yourself and then come back in a different space where maybe some validation can happen.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, then you can move towards a more
Hmm.
beneficial conversation, right? That's going to benefit everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you? Have experienced validation or not feeling validated?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think as humans, I'm sure we've all had moments where we either felt invalidated or have accidentally invalidated someone else and also validated.
Hmm.
But I think with the invalidation too, I think it goes into like Gottman's bids for connection. So like
Mm.
sometimes I have felt invalidated because I've mentioned something, but then sometimes it's missed. And so I may have maybe put a bid for connection or for attention,
Hmm.
and then it's missed either by like my partner or my mom or my brothers or a friend or whoever. It can sometimes be missed. And so then that doesn't feel good. And so
Hmm.
sometimes it becomes like a conversation later of like, hey, now that you now that it's a good time for us to have this conversation, like I mentioned something that was like a window to maybe a deeper thing that I wanted to talk about, and I really felt ignored or whatever. And then that can be a bigger conversation. But I think sometimes when we're invalidated often, it can come from sometimes invalidation can come from toxic positivity, where we might be feeling a certain way
Mm.
that's quite valid and normal for us to feel. Like, I'm really,
Hmm.
I don't know, feeling upset about this, and this. And I don't know if you've had it in
Hmm.
your experience with clients, but sometimes that happens in the therapy room where a client will be like, I'm feeling this, and this, but oh my gosh, that's such first world problems. And I'm like, sure, it might be, but for you, that's a real thing. And so it's okay for you to validate that. It's okay for you
Hmm.
to hold space for that feeling and not invalidate yourself or kind of fuel it with toxic positivity of, oh my God, it could be worse, or other people have it
Hmm.
bad. Like, it's not a competition over who
Hmm.
is suffering the most. But just being able to kind of have that moment just to check in of that invalidation that we can often give to ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that I've always been, or maybe more recently, been aware of. Like, not saying like, "Oh, well, at least this didn't happen to you," or
Right.
"Oh, well, yeah, it could be worse if this had have happened," because you're really taking away from what's going on in that person's life in the moment and the
Yeah.
importance of it. Like, they brought it up to me. It must be something that they want to talk about.
Hmm.
Um, so, in order to be validating, I need to honor what they're saying rather than being like, oh, well, at least this didn't happen.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard if that has kind of been modeled to us growing up.
Yeah.
Like if a parent or a caregiver has always kind of used that mentality of like, oh, things could have been way worse, or, be
Mhm.
grateful for what you have. Like all of those comments that can be, in one hand, it can be helpful because you have other things
Mhm.
to look forward to. But deeper than that, it can be quite invalidating, or at least not create that space for you to feel comfortable sharing or feel safe sharing.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
it does become difficult then to kind of break out of that pattern and be able to
Mhm.
pause, like you mentioned, to be like, okay, how can I hold space for this person in this moment, or at least check in with them to see if this is a conversation they want to for it to go further, or if maybe they just want to do a quick check-in to vent about whatever the thing is that they're feeling.
Hmm. I was just thinking about when you mentioned, if that was modeled for folks as they like, as if they're kids growing up or whatnot, and
Mhm.
how that might impact their ability to feel their feelings and
Yeah.
understand the feelings that they have, express their feelings in healthy ways,
Hmm.
because they weren't taught that that's okay, or that they weren't validated in sharing their emotions,
Yeah.
right? Like they're taught that, oh well, it could be worse, or
Yeah,
something else could happen to you. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how, like, big of an impact not validating folks can have.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think I ever thought about that before.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I know for my kiddos, there's been like, they'll either cry about something and they'll be like a family friend or a family member, whoever, that their intentions are positive. They're trying to help the situation, they're trying
Hmm.
to help the kiddo. And the way that they approach that might be through invalidation. Like, oh, don't cry, don't be a baby, like you're
Yeah.
fine,
Yeah.
get up and do the whatever it is that you're doing. But again, like that's learned and that's modeled, and it's okay because it's not coming from a negative place. But for my kiddos, they hear that, but then I'm like, it's okay that you're crying, it's okay that you're upset. What can I
Mhm.
do to support you right now? Do we need to take a break? Do we need to maybe have a sip of water? Do you want to just sit with mommy and have cuddles for a little bit and then go back out and play? Like, it's it's tough though, because like sometimes those comments, I'm like, ugh, please don't tell my kid to not cry or that they're being a
Mhm.
baby. But
Mhm.
I know, like, I can't blame them fully. It's coming from something
Mhm.
they've heard or that they've grown up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this conversation could spread all the way over into like toxic masculinity, but
Oh,
we don't have to go
100%.
there.
That'll be a topic for another time.
Yeah.
We did touch a little bit on validating ourselves. And I think,
Hmm.
like, we talk so much about how to validate other people, how to create
Hmm.
space for validating our partners, our people that we have really close relationships with. But I think we have the closest relationship to ourselves. And so it's really
Hmm.
important that we're also being mindful of how we are either validating or invalidating our own feelings, because a lot of the time it happens internally.
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that like paying attention to your self-talk is really important.
Hmm.
And so I had really, really negative self-talk at one point, and I really had to be mindful to catch those thoughts
Hmm.
as they were happening, and kind of look at them, examine them for their validity, and then, tell myself, no, it's okay that you're feeling this way, or
Yeah.
it's okay, whatever, so give myself permission to not only feel that way, but then also validate that feeling at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, like giving permission. So I think so
Hmm.
many times we're like, no, I shouldn't be feeling this way,
That's right.
or doing that. Like, other people have it worse. So I need to just suck it up and accept what it is.
Hmm.
And maybe we
Hmm.
need to accept situations, but the emotional response that we are having can still be validated. And that doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean that we need to sit with it forever and kind of let it drag us down. We can
Hmm.
at least see it. I mean, if we've learned anything from the movie Inside Out, it's that our emotions want to be seen. They want to be noticed. And our
Hmm.
emotions have a great way of kind of drawing attention to themselves in whatever way they can so that we can notice it. And so even
Hmm.
if we suppress our emotions because we're invalidating them or just not giving them permission to be, they're
Hmm.
going to find other ways to show up, whether that's
That's right.
somatically in our body. Well, like, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but every time around exam time, I'm all like, I was so stressed and I was like
Hmm.
fighting on like sleep and everything just to get prepared for this test. And the minute the test would be done, my body would be like, great, now you're sick because like you have suppressed all of these like feelings that you were having
Yeah.
to try to get you to the end goal, which is write your damn test. And then
Yeah.
they came flooding in through, again, like colds, pain. I hold a lot of my
Mm-hmm.
stress and tension in my shoulders and neck. And so that's a good place for me to kind of check in and be like, ooh, have I been maybe unknowingly or
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously suppressing some emotion? But it is like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just having that awareness.
Yeah. And I was, that reminds me of folks that weren't, folks that didn't have an opportunity to explore their emotions or feel their feelings when they're kids.
Hmm.
So they don't necessarily develop any tools to deal with the emotions that they have.
Yeah.
Um, and then that can also turn into like being sick or coping with their emotions in unhealthy ways, like using substances or
Yeah.
lots of relationships or things like that.
Hmm.
So I think um yeah, like going back to the self-talk, just how important it is to, like, if you don't have anybody around you that validates you, it's
Hmm.
really important to learn how to validate yourself
Hmm.
and incorporate that into your day to day.
Yeah. What's something that you can suggest to people to say to themselves if they're needing to validate an emotion? Like what's a script we can share with people?
Um, so so usually what happens with me is I'll have a thought in my head, like, well, let's just use "you're stupid" or something like that.
Hmm.
And I'll catch the thought and I'll be like, well, no, I'm not stupid because of A, B, and C. Actually, I'm really smart and I feel really good about the things that I've accomplished and
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. Or if I'm feeling upset about something or lonely or sad, um, like I'll say to myself, Sarah, it's okay to feel that way. Like this
Yeah.
and that and this and that is going on. You're
Hmm.
okay to feel sad. You're okay to feel lonely. Um, and so just again, giving myself permission to feel that
Hmm.
emotion and also acknowledging that it's okay and that it's valid.
Yeah. I love
And
how
then I
you,
think, yeah,
oh
sorry,
no,
go ahead,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I love how you put your hand on your chest
Yeah.
when you were like saying that permission, like it's okay that you're feeling this way.
Mhm,
I just like
mhm.
I don't know. I just noticed it and folks can't see it. So I noticed that you did put your hand on your chest. So yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know, I didn't, as you know, I didn't grow up in the best home as a child, so I didn't have my emotions validated. I didn't have my
Hmm.
emotional needs met. So having to almost like parent myself or
Yeah.
parent like the little girl inside of me, it's just been really important to
Hmm.
honor and validate how I'm feeling, regardless of how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And to give yourself permission to do that, because I think it might feel weird or scary, but the more you do it, the easier it is. And then
Hmm.
you're just like, I can do anything. I'm amazing.
Yeah, it's that practice. And I love that
Yeah.
script that you gave. Like, it's okay that you're feeling this way because A, B, and C is happening. So
Hmm.
this makes sense. Like, you're kind of giving yourself that space to, like, give yourself permission to feel that feeling, but also validating that it makes sense that you're feeling the way that you are. So, like,
Hmm.
anything like, it's okay that you're feeling this way, or I'm allowed to feel this
Hmm.
emotion that I'm having. It makes sense that I'm feeling this emotion right now. Um, I'm human. So the emotions that I'm having are going to be all over the place some days, and some days be a little bit less all over the place. And that's okay. That's
Hmm.
part of my journey. So being able to kind of have some of those scripts that you say to yourself is going to be helpful. And actually, while I was saying that, I do want to be mindful in saying, like, we're allowed to feel a certain way and we're allowed, our emotions are valid. Our
Hmm.
behaviors aren't always going to be.
Hmm.
And so it's
Yeah.
really important to be able to separate that not only from ourselves, but also in our relationship. If our partner comes home and they're kicking their boots off and they're, you know, shutting the door really loudly and just making a lot of stomping noises, I can reflect and be like, oh, that my partner's feeling really angry right now and their anger is valid, but the stomping and the kicking and the throwing and like the all of
Hmm.
the noise that's happening may not be. And so it's really important to be able to separate that when you're validating somebody, you're validating their emotion. You're not They're not exclusively linked to each other.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
feel angry, and you punching that person is not valid, but your anger is valid. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, being
Yeah.
able to separate those.
Yeah. Definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So, what would you say? So, let's say someone is in that situation and their partner comes home and they're kicking their shoes off or they're slamming the drawers. So what would you like? What would you say? What would you do?
Yeah, I think for me, if that was something that my partner would do, knowing my partner, I would probably give them a little bit of space. And
Mhm.
I think timing is really important when you're talking to somebody. So at that moment, to be like, what the F are you doing? Why are you slamming things so much? May not be the
Yeah.
best response, but I may make
Mhm.
a gentle comment, like an invitation to talk about it more, to be like, hey, is everything okay? It appears like you're really upset. Like, what's going
Mhm.
on? Do you want to talk about it? And then at least there's an
Mhm.
opening, and it's an invitation. And so the person on the other end can decline that invitation. They can
Mhm.
say, no, I don't want
Mhm.
to talk about it, or it's nothing, or whatever. And then they can come back later and be like, actually, like, work was really shitty today, or like,
Mhm.
had to deal with this customer conflict, and like that was really, really hard, and I didn't know what to do, or whatever it could be.
Mhm.
But that's like at a later time. So you've kind of created that invitation, and then you're waiting for them to
Mhm.
come to you. And then there can be a conversation about, like, I understand that you're angry. That situation sounds really frustrating. I'm sorry that that's something you had to experience. And then you can kind of eventually, as the conversation goes on, you can communicate how it felt for you for them to
Mhm.
come home all angry like that. And so you can lead to validating and then comforting them through the situation. You can ask them, like, do you want to just vent about this really annoying situation that happened at work? Or do you want to problem solve together? Like, do you want to just,
Mhm.
like, shoot some suggestions out loud and see what could work? And then depending on what they're wanting, then you can move forward with that. And when there's that security and you guys are feeling good together again, then it could be like, hey, next time that you're feeling really angry, like, I'd really appreciate it if you communicated that with me. Or, it's okay that you're feeling angry, but it really frightens me when boots are getting thrown and when I notice some of that aggression, and that doesn't make me feel comfortable. And so
Mhm.
being able to kind of talk it out together, but you're doing it in a way that you're not like, I hate it when you do this, this, and this. Like,
Mhm.
you're still
Yeah.
validating their emotion, but you're also sharing from your own experience. Like, it frightens me when this happens, not you make me feel scared when this happens, right? You're
Mhm.
saying the same thing, but in a different way. Um, that's not going to cause them to suddenly feel like they need to defend
Yeah.
themselves, which can
Yeah.
lead to more conflict after everything was just like nice
Right.
and calm after. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. I agree. I think it's so important to wait until we're both regulated again.
Yeah.
Let's regulate our nervous systems.
Mhm.
Let's come back to talking about something that could be a bit, controversial or somebody might get their back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some examples in there on like how you can validate someone is like, anything that you can see. So validating a partner by saying like, hey, I really appreciate that you cooked dinner today. I had a really busy week. And so you taking that on really means a lot to me. You can validate somebody by, again, observation. Like, you look really tired this week. I see how hard you have been working, and I'm here for you if you need to talk about anything or if you
Mhm.
need support. So like those are examples of emotional validation. And then if somebody is feeling a certain way, then it's just trying to kind of bring that back to them. Like, you're
Mhm.
feeling resentful. I get it. I understand how you would feel resentful in that moment, or I understand how you felt really lonely in that moment. Do you want to problem solve this? What can we do so that, you can communicate when you're feeling that way, so we can figure something out together? So just any kind of comment or any kind of like ways to validate their emotion is just by paraphrasing, sharing that
Mhm.
observation, or just, yeah, acknowledging the emotion.
The only thing that I wanted to add, and this is should have said it a long time ago, but my one of my girlfriends she always says, I'm a human being with a wide range of emotions.
Yes.
And yeah, and for me, like when she said that to me, I'm like, that is so true.
Hmm.
Right? Like, and so I think sometimes it can be like I felt invalidated when people that are important to me don't like recognize or honor, the fact that I'm feeling a certain way in a situation,
Hmm.
and can be dismissive. But I'm like, no, I am a human being with a wide range of emotions, and
Yeah.
how I'm feeling right now is okay, and my feelings are valid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's just been a good reminder for me sometimes.
I love that. And
And
you're also
yeah,
going to your humanness.
that's right. Yeah. And that somebody doesn't need to agree with you. Doesn't need to validate you in order for
Yeah,
your feelings to be valid. So,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And I do love that you checked in on me because I did say the word understanding and validation, but you can validate somebody without fully understanding exactly what it was that they were feeling. But you can understand that their emotional response to it could make sense in that situation.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a difference in that understanding.
Yeah. It's really hard to tease out. Like when you think about validating somebody, it's really like I Googled it beforehand. I'm like, this does not make any sense.
Yeah.
But it's really hard, I think, to tease out like a true or pure definition of validation.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but I think that the tools that we've suggested today are pretty great, and hopefully people can use them or apply them in their lives or relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, this could be like a two-parter too. But for now, I also hope that this was helpful. Thank you, Sarah, so much
Mhm.
for being here. And yeah, if you want to hear more, feel free to check out our rest of our episodes at Outside the Therapy Room or follow us on Outside the Therapy Room pod on Instagram and TikTok. And thank you so much. We will see you next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.